Before we go further to the video, I just want to say today's video is sponsored by BetterHelp. BetterHelp, in case you didn't know, is one of the best places online that you go to if you need a counselor or just someone to talk to. BetterHelp offers affordable online counseling. You can get access to licensed, trained, and experienced trained psychologists, marriage and family therapists, clinical social workers, and board licensed professional counselors, so there won't be any shortage of people who can help you and talk to you about anything you're struggling with. And all you got to do is go to BetterHelp by using the link in the description box, then answer a few questions, then they match you with the counselor based on those questions, and then you're all set. Plus, if you ended up being paired with a counselor that you don't like, you can always switch to another one who suits you best. So yeah, if you decide to check out BetterHelp, make sure to use the link in the description box or the comment section down below, as it supports the channel. And by the way, I am in convalescence, and with that being said, let's jump right in the video. Ancient Alien Goddesses, her story revealed by Celeste Yarnall, PhD, posted October 13, 2014 by celestialmusingsblog. The following is a taste of what I will share with you here at my Ancient Alien Goddess blog, as well as in my work in progress book titled Ancient Alien Goddesses, and my upcoming workshops and talks. Here we will take a timeline journey over hundreds of thousands, possibly millions of years, both off-planet and on Mother Earth, and explore our mitochondrial DNA connection to the ancient alien goddesses that unites all living women as sisters and connects us to mitochondrial Eve in Africa, because it is my hypothesis that this empty DNA connection came to Earth via the Anunnaki goddesses, who from heaven to earth came along with their male counterparts from a planet called Nibiru. We will meet NINMAH, the Anunnaki goddess and chief medical officer, whose specialty was the life sciences. She is the great goddess who becomes known by many names throughout the midst of time, such as Ninardag, Ninti, Mami, Hathor, Isis, Athena, Minerva, who along with her half-brother Enki and his son by his half-sister Ereshkigal, Ningishzida, who played an active role in this genetic experiment. But let us not forget that NINMAH was the doctor in charge, or chief medical officer. NINMAH trained Ningishzida and had the wherewithal to implement a plan that she and Enki hatched together, that Enki has been credited with for too long. It was none other than NINMAH whose role was of the true creatrix, the actual genetic engineer of the Homo sapiens species that we are all belong to today. So the link will be posted in the video description, of course. We will meet the first pair of human beings known by us as Adam and Eve, who were actually named Danu, whom NINMAH carried in her own womb, and Tiamat, whose Enki's wife carried in her womb. We will learn that these first two people look like, how they lived, and who their offspring were. I hope to connect the dots that leads us back directly to our being related to them to this very day through our feminine empty DNA, which came from off planet with the ancient alien goddesses themselves. We will also learn how patriarchy came to be via a series of catastrophic events on Nibiru that caused the loss of a huge percentage of the Nibirian male population and damaged many of the surviving male sperm. I will share my own personal experiences in what I call quantum entangling with the key Anunnaki goddesses by accessing the frequency of Theta, where I also read between the lines of what was being written and has been hidden from us by patriarchy through the ages. And speaking of patriarchy, back on Mother Earth, it was lack of the scientific facts of life, according to Julia Stonehouse, author of Idols to Incubators and the new ebook Father Seeds, Mother Sorrow. The rise of patriarchy occurred because historically around 3000 BC things began to change drastically for women and remained so all the way up until 1900 AD. During this period in history, a major shift in the patriarchal society occurred almost all over the world at just about the same time, which is as dramatic as a polar shift might be if one occurred in our lifetimes. This shift made women second-class citizens, with the exception of an isolated island population here or there for the next 5,000 years. It was declared true, what was called science in its day, that there was only one seed of life, and it was found in the male's testes. The woman, our foremothers, were just the fertile or infertile soil that the male planted his seed into. A very telling example of a quote which was said to have been written in 350 BC was from the ancient Greek Aristotle, who influenced thinking for thousands of years by saying, according to Mrs. Stonehouse, quote, "The male semen cooks and shapes through blood into a new human being," unquote. I think it was a given that even Aristotle would admit that it would be the woman that would nourish the male seed and nurture it with her body, but she would not be considered its parent. Apparently not one woman mourned the passing of Aristotle. The distinction of being the creator of life belongs exclusively to males. Every imaginable pseudo-scientific reason was dragged into play through the ages, such as Aristotle's menstrual blood analogy, in order for the male of the human species to dominate and control where seed was planted. The research from science is staggering as they propose every which way a man does this. It was thought that even an education would weaken a woman, so much so that it would render her less of a baby-making machine. As author Julia Stonehouse shared in her landmark first book, Idols to Incubators, Reproduction Theory Through the Ages, the status woman enjoyed once as idols was reduced to basically being just the baby incubator for the father seed. I highly recommend that you read her book as well as her new ebook entitled Father's Sin, Mother's Sorrow. I also recommend Mrs. Stonehouse's excellent article on the Good Men Project website entitled Is This the End of the Patriarchy? To truly understand the road less traveled by a few brave souls who tried to overturn this dictum, which some compelling science, everything from threat of death or ridicule, would follow. Think of it this way. Why would the good holy boys want to give up complete control over what he thought to be exclusively his children? Besides that, as Julia Stonehouse points out, only male children were of value and females were dead hens, and the veritable hen of the male line, and therefore worthless. Now first we can understand why we see certain dress codes enforced for women in many parts of the world. The male had to make certain that all other males were kept away from their woman. Why? Because how else could paternity be ensured? She, in many parts of the world, would not have any rights in divorce or death of her spouse to keep her children. The children belong to the father and or his family. As we examine human rights violations the world over that still exist today, such as the female circumcision, abortion of female fetuses, although illegal because of the patriarchal desire for male heirs in India and elsewhere, deaths and or disappearances of newborn infant girls in China, to every atrocity perpetrated against women all over the world, including human sex trafficking. It is known that in certain parts of the world a box was kept next to the birthing bed with tools to be used to the help the midwife murder an infant daughter. Up to and around 10,000 BC, according to Mrs. Stonehouse, this was a time period that gave woman 100% responsibility for life. Intercourse, it was thou, virtually had nothing to do with the making of babies, and men had no say over female sexuality. It would be Julia Stonehouse who would lead me to a path of discovery in her two books that demonstrated that the matrilineal way of life continued from 10,000 BC to approximately 3000 BC, where we would still find the idea that the female contains the seed of life in her womb. Men were given some recognition in this time period because they collectively concluded that men watered a seed found within women with their semen. However, women were still thought to be the source of the seed of life, and again, men didn't have a say in women's sexuality. We would not learn here in the Western world of the science that was daring to explore the role of the female ovum, although found to be valid for fruit flies and garden peas, etc., between parentheses that without a doubt women were 50-50 partners with men in the creation of human life, were not understood nor accepted in scientific circles until 1900 AD, but it would not be until 1960, yes, 1960, with the publication of a book called Ovum Humanum, Its Growth, Maturation, Nourishment, Fertilization, and Early Development by Dr. Landrum Brewer-Shaddles. After publication, between parentheses, that the facts that would set the record straight would be shown photographically. We all know how scientifically that there are 23 chromosomes in the head of a sperm, one of which determines the sex of the child, possibly becoming a male because of the XY chromosomes between parentheses, and that there are an equal 23 chromosomes within the nucleus of the ovum, none of which determines any other sex but female because women carry XX chromosomes with a few exceptions between parentheses. Scientists, upon this two-seed, two-sex equal partners discovery, quickly buried down the rabbit hole. Some 5,000 years of patriarchal father rule between parentheses, domination, tyranny, and control of virtually every aspect of women's lives, from inheritance of property to any rights whatsoever. We can only give respectful pause and reflect on these very facts that cause the head of many queens to roll, to not bearing some man or some king a male hair. Think, for instance, Anne Boleyn. She was, of course, falsely accused of adultery, when in fact it was her husband who was the adulterer, but because she was not providing a male heir, she just lost her head over this. This is just one example. And the crazy one was Henry VIII, not Anne Boleyn. I have a channel that I work on, and I will put it as a card. A channel dedicated to Anne Boleyn, and I will put it as a card. A channel dedicated to Anne Boleyn. This treatment of women and girls throughout the ages is a very brutal and violent legacy that we all carry epigenetically to this very day. I call it an epigenetic hangover because I is still sick with this drunkard use of patriarchal power in many parts of the world. What is meant by the word epigenetic? In a nutshell, the context in which I am proposing this idea is basically that which rises above the genome. It is what we carry with us from generation to generation. Call it emotional garbage, but it also affects our health on a body, mind and spirit level, and it may result in how we behave today. Epigenetics is not our DNA genetic blueprint of, say, dark hair or blue eyes, etc. It belongs to a field of study all its own. Doing your own research by delving into the writing of Julia Stonehouse of what actually took place for women over this period of time may be for many like opening a deep wound and letting it bleed out. However, as we said in that now famous ad campaign from years ago, quote, "We've come a long way, baby," end of the quote. And understanding what has happened brings it into the light of day and helps us heal collectively. Before I will continue to read, I'll say that, I was speaking about the years 1960s. Something happened to me personally during that time. In fact, more precisely to my mother, and I will put the channel that I created in her memory as a card, because it was not a good period for women, even during the 1960s. My own research, continue to read. My own research through the writings of Zecharia Sitchin, Michael Teller, Janet and Sasha Lisson, Joel Clark, Christian O'Brien, Lawrence Gardner, and many, many more now, leads me off planet to Nibiru, where I see patriarchy rose its ugly head hundreds of thousands to millions of years ago due to the nuclear wars that took place between the factions of the North and South Nibiruans against one another, and then the ridiculous act of nuking down volcanoes to cause ash to spew into their own layer, which had holes opening up in it from the nuclear blasts and various wars that caused ecological catastrophes that took place. With the same mentality of domination, we see patriarchy sponsor here on Mother Earth. The expression "as above, so below" continues to come to mind as I study this material ushered in by the horseback riding patriarchal info Europeans. I don't think info is the right word. I studied this material ushered in by the horseback riding patriarchal. Cannot make up this first word, but Europeans is the later word. It seems on Nibiru after their own nuclear holocaust, many men wiped out. It seems on Nibiru, after their own nuclear holocaust, many men were wiped out and we dying in droves. Those that survived had damaged sperm and the woman fared better. There were far more women than men, and they were needed to help rebuild the male population on Nibiru. Women, even queens, were valuable assets, but instead of rolling side by side with their husbands, they instead became breeders and were worn out, exhausted, and lost their spirit. I think many of these women remember the time of equality between the men and women of Nibiru, and some probably longed to this way of life to return, whilst others enjoy being worshipped along with the perks between commas of that worship in being reduced to breeding machines, or as Julia Stonehouse would say, mere incubators. I felt there were two very different types of Nibiruan women, and this is where perhaps the division came from and ended up on Earth between the Enlilith and Enki men and women. I see clearly from the writings of Sitchin and others that old monster, the seed between Kama's theory, was very much alive, but I think they lacked the sophisticated knowledge, or perhaps had forgotten that a woman didn't just carry the male seed from her father, but rather, as we know it today, actually carried her own brand of DNA called MT DNA, which woman passed from mother to daughter, all the way back here on Earth to MT Eve in Africa. But now I hypothecate back to Nibiru. I don't think they knew that women could not pass their father's seed. Only men can pass their nuclear DNA. Or perhaps that seed was all they cared about. However, one of the earlier queens of Nibiru instituted a double seed theory of her own, when a child by a lesser wife or concubine would inherit everything. She proclaimed that her child, although born later, had the double seed. The elders believed this, and so her son was promoted to succession. We see this happen quite naturally to Enki, who was Anu's firstborn. when Antu's firstborn and little usurped Enki, and of course all males trumped females. I further contend that NINMAH learned this secret mitochondrial information but purposely withheld it as she saw the danger of father rule or patriarchy with these warring bloodline seed obsessed Anunnaki relatives of hers. I suggest that the way she learned about it was by downloading from the Danu, whom she carried in her womb, the Akashic record of our hominid ancestors, just as Danu downloaded in his own fetal tissue the Akashic record of the Anunnaki and the terraformers who came before them. You see, all female mammals carry the empty DNA of their mother and know on a cellular level of their deep and profound connection to all life on planet Earth. I believe NINMAH also shared this information with Damkina so that this breakthrough knowledge could be downloaded to Tiamat via Tiamat's fetal tissue, and therefore download this Akashic record directly into the cellular matrix of Damkina. Therefore, these two bird goddesses who carried the first Homo sapiens had a secret knowing that the so-called gods, between commas, of old or Anunnaki had no knowledge of, and this knowledge is within all women today and merely needs to be ignited and reawakened. When Nigizida learned from his and NINMAH's DNA research that the Nibiran women have a recessive XY chromosomal allele in their genotype, whereas Tiamat had only XX. The team could then make the necessary medical interventions to cause Tiamat to become fertile, which allowed Edemu to impregnate her, and thus they became the first fertile human couple. Enki, Timma, and Nigizida needed to hide how they had turned Tiamat, so therefore she and Adamu stayed in Enki's Persian Gulf orchard while her fetus gestated. There's much work that needs to be done today right here on Mother Earth to upgrade women to being equals with men and basically achieve gender equality for all genders today, and we need to what can be done now to right the inequality that remains within our current patriarchal system here on Earth. And that is why I feel the film my husband and I produced, entitled Femme, Woman Healing the World, calls upon us all, both men and women, and all genders between parentheses, to act for the changes we want now, but do this with a forgiving heart. As T.S. Wiley states so eloquently in Femme, quote, I think punishing men because they had a I think punishing men because they had a long turn at the helm. I think punishing them because they're just men is beneath us. I think as women we always had enough power. We'll have more power, and those of us who know it should wield it with some mercy. End of the quote. I'm all for that as well, because we need men to be our allies and partners. It's clear we need the Equal Rights Amendment to at long last be passed so that we women today, our daughters and granddaughters, have equal rights constitutionally with men now and in the future. I will share in my book and my following talks and workshops how there is an element known today in our DNA that shows signs of intentional possible alien interference, and I juxtapose this against what is written on Sumerian clay tablets. What I ask of you is to open your mind and heart and simply ask yourself, could we be uncovering an aspect of our hidden her story, or just more mythology. I thank you for listening. This was written by Celeste Yarnall, PhD. Title of it is Ancient Alien Goddesses or Stories Revealed, and it was posted by celestialmusingsblog on October 13, 2014, and I will put the link in the video description. Please subscribe if you liked, and please share if you like, and I will continue to pursue my healing. Thank you for listening.